that I know that claiming crosses is my X factor. It was in college, and so I need to make sure that I don't irrationally chase things, knowing that it's my X factor. So it's just subconsciously in my mind. In training, more specifically than games. In games, I want to rely on my instinct, but in training, I know, okay, I'm quite good at this. I'm going to continue to explore what my edges are, but in games, I'm going to rely on what my instincts are and not chase things because in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, I'm really good at this, even if it's not a situation that I could influence.
Yeah, that is so important. And I know we've talked about it before, but like our strengths can't become, well, oftentimes our strengths do become something that we like can use as a detriment, but just being aware of it, I think kind of helps negate that. And there are going to be times where it still happens, but it's just all about being intentional. So much of life is about being intentional and being intentional about taking the time to say, okay, here's my X factor and here's how I'm going to use it. Here's what it looks like in this situation, that situation, just kind of relying on those strengths without overdoing it. Overdoing anything is a bad thing, right?
Yep. Too much coffee makes me jittery.
Ain't that the truth? I had 600 milligrams of caffeine the other day and I didn't sleep for 2 days.
Oh, well, that's a problem. I don't know what the milligram situation is. I just drink until I feel like, okay, if I'm a little bit more is going to put me over the edge.
Yeah, it was not a good situation. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But so on and so forth. Let's go on to number 2, communication. And I think this is this topic that people really seem to struggle with, and I don't know if it's kind of hard to teach thing or if people don't spend the time teaching it. Is there a lack in like a tactical understanding of like what to say? Is it a confidence of how to say it, when to say it? But I think communication is an area that can, one, really show your presence on the field, and two, I think communicating and knowing what you're seeing and being able to articulate it can also breed a lot of confidence for a goalkeeper.
I totally agree with you. I think confidence, I think your question of like, why don't people communicate more? It is all rolled into one. I think that there's a few things that go into it. Is like communication, it depends on your game understanding, right? So a 10-year-old, they don't have a great library of game understanding, right? They don't have this like deep understanding of the game. And so they're just in there just reacting on what they see and like diving around and coming out being aggressive. And so I just want to normalize that 10-year-olds shouldn't really be great at communication.
Yeah.
Like that's okay. Even 14-year-olds, like your communication library should be somewhat limited to like 4 or 5 things. And if you did them in all the circumstances, you'd be a great communicator, right? But like when people say that you need to communicate, start with keeper and away. Like that's the easy thing to communicate. And like you typically know if you're coming out or if you're not coming out, that you should say that and say that loud. And that just that one thing for a small or for a younger goalkeeper could really be a great difference maker. And when I'm coming, so it's funny that we bring this up because I was speaking to Maddie Prohaska the other day, and she was like, Jill, what do you think about this? She conceded a penalty, right? So she came out, it was like a longer ball into the box. She came out and she timed it wrong, and the player got to the ball first, and then she trucked the player, and they called a pen on her. And she was like, what do you think? And I was like, do you remember in this play if you yelled keeper? And she was like, honestly, I blacked out. I don't really remember. And I was like, the only reason I ask is because sometimes when you yell keeper loudly, it really does impact what the striker does because they're looking up at the ball and they have no idea if you're coming or not, if you're going to time that right or not. And so when you yell keeper, that could like get them to shudder a little bit and give you more space to come and take the ball. So communication, if you feel like it's not your strength yet, that's okay. Ask more questions about what you should say, when you should say it, how you should say it, right? Because I can't communicate urgently if the situation isn't urgent because I'm losing some of my think of your communication as like a bank, right? You only have a certain amount of words and a certain amount of tone and urgency that you can say those words in a game before people start to drown you out. So think of it as like, okay, this is urgent. I need to communicate that urgent. The house isn't on fire, so I can just make a small adjustment and say, hey, Tori, slide to your left, right? It is an art. I think communication is an art, and it is something that you're not going to get overnight. And it's just something that you will develop over time. The more comfortable you get with understanding what the situation is that you're looking for, what triggers and cues you're looking for, and also just as you get more comfortable with your voice.
Yeah. I think less is more, especially if it's something that you're like, this isn't my strong suit, then less is definitely more. If it's something that you're like, I feel pretty good about this, then yeah, I do think your dictionary can get a little bit larger and your bank is a little bit larger to pull from. But I also think it's so, so, so important that you understand your teammates. What do your teammates need from you? Obviously, there's things that are like you have to talk about no matter what, right? If someone needs to be like stepping, it's step, right? If you need your line to get up after a set piece, it's whatever your team's verbiage is. But I also think it's really important to have that relationship with your back 4 or 5 and kind of know what they're going to respond to and when, because the more that you have that communication between each other, sometimes the easier it can even become. And I think in club soccer and college soccer, like that becomes a little bit more manageable because you are practicing multiple times a week and playing with them multiple times a week, as opposed to maybe high school soccer or like a travel team where it's not as consistent. I think developing those relationships goes a really long way and making the communication feel a lot easier for you.
I think there's a lot that goes into communication, and if you guys want to know more about that, you should really check out TKI University because we go over that in depth in one of our classes, like a beginner level communication and an in-depth level communication with different examples from we use from Spidio, which was really a great tool. It has a 360-degree view of the cell, and so it's really, really helpful in terms of like seeing what the goalkeeper sees and being able to spot those different triggers and cues of what's happening and how we can communicate. Because the more effectively we communicate, the more difficult it is for the opponent to score. And so, although everyone wants to make saves and people equate saves as good goalkeeping, really we don't even want those saves to happen. We want to prevent those opportunities. And I think the best goalkeepers in the world are the most preventative ones because they don't have to face a ton of shots, right? So if we can communicate more effectively, then it would be harder for the opponent to score.
Yeah, I think you are onto something. A communication workshop could be in the workshopping stages, but I think that TKI University is the best way to learn, and there's just a lot of great insight and perspective, not only from yourself and Coach Chris coming in to talk with them, but just fellow goalkeepers getting to workshop together is huge. That's something you guys definitely want to check out if you haven't already. But won't keep you too much longer. The last way to develop a really great presence is also just to be yourself. You know what your X factor is now after doing this podcast. You have a couple ideas on how to communicate a little clearer, but also just being yourself and bringing your best can help us have a great presence as well. So let's use you, Jill. You knew you were great at protecting the goal area. You knew you're a really good teammate. You know that you were going to support and encourage. You knew that part of your identity was to be a hard worker. I'm sure if you brought all those things, your presence was just exuding out of you, and it made people feel like probably when they look at you like, wow, that's a confident goalkeeper.
Yeah, that when I reflect on my career, that was when I played the best, is when I had confidence, and not an external confidence of you telling me I was good, but an internal like belief in my skill set and my tool. Knew what I was really good at, and I was going to try to bring that to the table as best I could every game. I think for me, the hardest part of my career and the trap that I fell into was trying to be someone else.
Yeah.
And, I played with the best goalkeeper that's ever played the position. And quite often, every day, I just kind of thought, like, how can I be more like her? Because obviously, people value her worth and people value her contribution to this game. And so, how can I mold my game more like her? And in essence, I lost myself and I lost what I was good at. And every decision I made had hesitation behind it, or questioning, or it was like half in, half out of it. And every time I walked on the field, I played with like this crippling anxiety if I wasn't enough because I continued to compare myself to her. And I think that there's an element of like, yeah, I want to pick and choose and take from her and learn from her and add some in possession elements from her game, but also not lose sight of what I'm really good at, what I bring to the table, and who I am as a player. And I think if I would have done that, I would have one, played a little bit, but two, probably enjoyed it more because I was always thinking about what do I lack instead of what do I bring.
Mm.
And when you operate out of this like scarcity mindset, it's not as enjoyable, or you're like adding so much fear to like you're attaching fear to your identity, which to me, I don't think I truly was able to understand and reflect on that until I was done playing.
One, thank you for sharing, because I think that that's something that a lot of people could probably relate to. And I know it's not easy to always talk about like those things too. And just when you think about, yeah, I was not the best of myself because I was just sitting there playing this comparison game, which is that comment has kind of come up in a few of the podcasts that we've done recently. And I think that there's a lot of like value in that, but it's so hard to be yourself. And if you can't be yourself, then like, how are you supposed to play with a certain presence or a certain confidence or a comfort to make decisions, right? Goalkeeping is all about decision making. So how can I do that if everything feels a little bit stunted and hesitated?
Right.
I think that that's so valuable, and I think that if you don't take anything else from that this podcast, I think it should be that. Rewind to listen to it again, because that's so important. And it just makes me think about it. Like before every game, like before we go out on the field, I just look at Kate, who's my goalkeeper at St. Joe's, and I just say, just be KT, have fun, because we don't need you to be anybody else. So if you're a coach or if you're a player, just how can you draw into just who you are? Know your X factor, know what you bring to the table, and know kind of like what is that characteristic that it just can't be shaken of you. No one can take it. Welcome to the Keeper Institute podcast. My name is Tori Corsaro. I'm a strength and conditioning and goalkeeper coach here at the Keeper Institute, and your host for today's show. The Keeper Institute is a unique goalkeeper training facility in New Jersey aimed at developing better goalkeepers and better people. On this podcast, we will be discussing all things goalkeeping, character development, and more. Welcome back to another episode of the Keeper Institute podcast. Nice. Yeah. Really good, Jill.
Thank you.
And you wouldn't know it, but we do have 3 other guests besides Jill and I on this podcast. They were a little air horn shy. But 3 of my favorite human beings are joining us today. And then obviously, my 4th favorite human being, not in that order, is Jill. So we're all back. We're together. And I feel like it's a TKI summer with these guests that we got, Jill.
I know it's not that hot out, but I am happy to have our peeps back.
So without further ado, we have Megan Plaschko, Kaitlyn Parks, and Maddie Prohaska joining us to talk about creating the environment of your dreams at the college level, club level, pro level, whatever it may be. We're going to talk about how to create a training environment that not only suits you, but also all the goalkeepers that are involved.
Tori, I think this is a really good topic because obviously at TKI we have a very specific environment that we create, and we allow everyone to express their own individuality in that environment. However, we're the ones that design it and curate it. It's not a default, it's just by design. But I think probably most people are inquiring that listen to this podcast are like, well, I don't live near New Jersey and I don't get to train in the TKI environment. However, I can recognize and acknowledge that maybe my environment isn't what I hoped it to be. And I think having these 3 players on to talk about how you design your own environment, even if everyone else isn't aware consciously of what you're trying to create, but it is possible to have a really good environment, even when you're the one that's like kind of leading it as a goal, as the player. Yeah,
for sure. So you guys, I'm going to have you go through, I'm going to have you say your name, where you're currently playing at, and then we're going to get into that first question.
I can go
Megan,
first,
take it away.
Oh, okay. I'm Megan Plaschko, and I currently play at TCU.
I'm Kaitlyn Parks, and I currently play at Michigan State.
I'm Maddie, and I currently play at Auburn University.
Awesome. KP, you losing that voice? You sick, or you just screaming a lot in games?
I always lose my voice like 2 days after the game, and it comes back just for the next game to come.
Wow, it's like a never-ending cycle. All right, well, we could also definitely do a whole podcast on that for you. Okay, so we're going to get into the first question, and Megan, I'm going to have you go first. So we kind of broke it into 3 bullet points, and kind of the best way that I see it to set the tone in your training environment is to get clear and set intentions. What do you think that looks like for you?
I think a big thing for me that I learned this summer was I don't have the time to write it down right now, but as soon as our goalkeeper coach here lets me know what our session is about, whether it's going to be 1v1s, crossing and finishing, whether it's going to be protecting the space, in possession, I think that it's really important to me to pick 2 or 3 things that I know is going to be super important in that session for me. And I verbally speak it to the goalkeepers next to me because I want to be held accountable to the things that I'm going to be trying to work on and set my intentions in those practices. And I also think a really big thing for that is by me voicing that to the goalkeepers around me, they can help me be held accountable, but they can also help the service that they're giving achieve those goals. So if we're doing 1v1s and I really want to work on smothering versus spread that day, they can tailor their service to me to allow me to set up to be able to smother more than spread in that training. And so I think that's one thing that it really looks like for me is just speaking to the goalkeepers around me to have accountability, but also to allow them to tailor their service.
Yeah. KP, what about you? How do you set intentions for training sessions?
For me, I'm kind of someone that always wants to get better at a bunch of little things. And so kind of like Megan, I've learned, especially this year, the longer I've been in college, it's really key to just kind of have those 2 or 3 bullet points. And us, we have 3 keepers and then a keeper coach. So we kind of all talk about it. We do a little warm-up game and we kind of all talk about it then. But just to even though as the training progresses, to just make sure my focus is heightened back to those 2 or 3 goals that we set at the beginning. Because otherwise, it kind of just starts this frustrating spiral. So I feel that's helped me a lot.
Sure. Last and certainly not least, Maddie, what about you? What does intention setting look like for you?
I feel especially throughout a season, there's not as much intentional training going on, at least in my environment, from just 2 games a weekend and day off mandatory. You're not really getting an opportunity to kind of hone in on specific skills to develop. And so for me, it's more kind of putting intentionality towards what I want my attitude or my mental side to look like, because I feel that it can be constant no matter what the skill or the practice is looking like. So it's kind of cheesy, but depending on whatever it is, sometimes I'm just be nice to yourself. And it's okay, at least today, no matter what the mistake is, or it's the day before a game, I just need to have that okayness with myself no matter what the situation is, so that then the next day when it's a game day or a couple days before a game, I'm kind of going in with the mindset that mistakes and anything is just kind of the flow of the game and is what's going to happen. So I kind of take more the mental approach when it comes to a lot of my intentionality throughout the season.
I think that's great because that's something you can constantly control. It might be harder to set an intention for something super specific if the session is something super specific, but your mental side of it is always going to be there. I have a follow-up question for you, Maddie, on that. When it comes to you focusing on be kinder to myself, or maybe it's I'm going to be the most encouraging, whatever it may be that day, how do you think that impacts your fellow training partners?
I think it's really important, especially when you're the veteran of a training group, that you're the one that sets the tone, even when you're not having your on days where you can be the most encouraging, because that's not an expectation you should have for yourself every single day to be the most encouraging and the best team. If you're having a bad day, that's when someone else can lift you up. And so for me, it's being able to be vulnerable and open with my other teammates and just being hey, today it kind of is going to look like this for me. I just whatever, for example, I kind of took a hard knock in one of our last games, and then the next day for me it was really just trying to get my confidence and just my appreciation for myself back. And I was kind of open with the people around me in that moment, where it was I just have to be kind to myself, and it also holds me accountable to being kind to myself, because it kind of can just take, how KP was talking about frustration, can kind of just take one thing as a goalkeeper sometimes if you're not really there all the way to kind of let it spiral. So having the people to hold you accountable and lean on the people that you need to lean on to make sure that you're kind of developing that kind of mental side throughout the season.
Yeah, that's really good. So it kind of perfectly bleeds into my next question for you guys. Well, I guess my next bullet point, and I want to know how you kind of express that. So talking about like how you can set the tone is bringing the energy that you want to receive. It's not just about the energy that I bring in terms of my intensity, but also what do I want my training partners to be kind of like bring to the session as well. And if I'm not, especially you guys are all veteran players, like if I'm not doing it, is it going to be like what the first years are doing? The answer is maybe, maybe not. And no one wants to leave their training environment up to maybe. So KP, can you talk to me a little bit about what it looks like to bring a certain energy that's productive for your training environment?
Yeah, one thing that like Michigan State as a whole does that I think is really beneficial, a little controversial, but we don't have captains, so we kind of like don't really look at different classes because we have so many transfers that came in that were kind of just like one team, but we don't have captains, which kind of like gives like a platform for maybe some of like the younger players to also feel comfortable enough to kind of like share their voice as well and their leadership. It's not solely relied on 2 or 3 people. And I think that kind of just like feeds off this like positive energy because when you have like a younger player that's kind of like having their voice, having their like leadership involved, it kind of like feeds off like the next play and they're like, okay, I'm comfortable enough to be able to now share my voice, and it kind of just like brings us together as a whole to like yes, hold each other accountable when the energy's not there and the intensity is not there. But it also, like, when I see one of our freshmen or one of our underclassmen that are like now coming to me and be like, hey, like maybe we could like do this. I'm like, yeah, 100%. Like, I love like that bravery and that courage to be able to like speak to like a 6 year, which might not be like that at every single school. But then that like then comes back onto me, and now okay, I feel like now I can like bring this positive energy to someone else, and it kind of just shares all of this like I don't know contagious like feedback and positivity and all that throughout without like the fear of being rejected.
I love that. Megan, what about for you guys? What does it look like in your environment to kind of bring that energy?
Yeah, this year, so we have 2 freshmen and 2 transfers. That's our 4 goalkeeper group. So we had a really unique situation where we kind of got to define our environment how we wanted to. So before season started, the 4 of us sat down aside from our goalkeeper coach and just really made intentional expectations of this is the standard for the goalkeepers and this is how we're going to hold it throughout the year. And so I think as like the most senior player in the group, I've really taken it as kind of how Maddie was saying earlier, like I want to wear my emotions on my sleeve and show that it's okay to have good and bad days, but the energy that you bring can't be dependent on those good and bad days. Like it, even if I'm having the worst day, I still want to try and bring it for my teammates while also having the vulnerability to be like, I'm having a really hard day and I need you guys to support me in that. Like the best example I have is after our Notre Dame game. We lost 4-0. It was a really, really, really hard time for everyone. We were kind of in that lost stage of no one really knew what happened in the game. We didn't understand what was going on. And I don't think I've ever had 4 goals scored on me in 6 years. And so I was reeling as a 6th year trying to figure out what to do in the next training. But I think I really came back to I have an expectation and an opportunity to show these freshmen what the response needs to look like when things go wrong in training. And so the next training, I didn't really focus on how I played, to be completely honest. I came and I was the most encouraging, enthusiastic. I believed in the team around me, and that was my focus. And because of that, I actually trained really, really well. And I think that that's something that I really try and focus on this year, and our goalkeeping group as a whole really tries to focus on, is that no matter what state we're in, what state the team is in, whether we're doing great, we're having a rough practice, we just try and bring energy and hope that it bleeds to the rest of the team. Because a lot of the times in our sessions, we're coming from goalkeeping training into the team environment, and we have no idea how their training is going. But what we do know is that we can impact the energy and raise the level around us. Sorry. And so I think that's something we've really focused on, is just like the next one mentality, the mentality of bringing the energy as soon as we can and as loudly as we can. And so I think that intentionality, but also just focusing on being that positive force, is something we've really focused on this year in our goalkeeping room.
I think those answers are awesome. I also feel like a motorcycle just took off literally like inside the building,
I'm
like you're parked at an auto mall.
no, I'm out. I'm in our football stadium, but it's like half outside because I have to go inside at 8:45.
Yeah, you're good.
So
Listen, you're good.
in this in between, and they had like a little cart next to me that they just decided.
Yeah, we just had to acknowledge the fact that there was a motorcycle race happening behind Megan, and don't let that take from her answers because they were awesome. Maddie, hit us with it. Like, how are you bringing the energy? I think you've showed us a lot of that. Like, if you follow along TKI's Instagram, like there was a million pictures of you from the summer just like bringing the energy. Like, what have you taken from either that experience or even just like you being you to create and bring energy to your training environment?
Yeah, first off Plaschko, like I feel like obviously giving up goals is not easy, but when there starts to be like a plethora of them, it is really hard the next day to like bring the energy. And I feel like that's something I feel like especially over the summer that I learned from all the goalkeepers, but Plaschko especially, like she always had that like extra energy that kind of was contagious no matter what. So I don't know, the people at TCU are lucky to train with her. Just had to shout you out, Plaschko there. And for me, I feel like it's a lot to do with whatever the environment, how they talked about the other goalkeepers around them. I feel like I also set the intentions kind of early with the goalkeepers that I'm training with. It is interesting how we all have such a different goalkeeper environment just based on like the people that we're training with. And like for me, I'm a 5th year, and then the next closest to me is a redshirt sophomore, and then a redshirt freshman and a true freshman. So they're a lot younger than me in both like age but also experience. So a lot of times we're not living through the same lived experience from a playing standpoint, but I feel like for me, I take more of the example I'm trying to set is for next year, one of them to be able to step into my shoes. So not even from the practice standpoint, but I feel like we have a lot of intentional conversations about in-game experiences. And I feel like the next oldest to me, we have a lot of conversations about what it's like to be in a game situation and how the influence you can have on your team and the energy when maybe they're not getting the final product in the goal. How can you impact that with being so far away from the other goal? You know, it's not my job to score goals, but it is my job to help bring the confidence and energy to the team to feel like they can. And I feel like that's the biggest thing that I try to have as throughout practice that can then translate through game, but also I'm trying to help the back line and the other goalkeepers also learn that we might not be scoring the goals, but our influence and the confidence we can give others is what's going to help put the final product in the goal.
You guys are wise beyond your years. I know you're 6th and 5th years, but KP, are you a 9th year? What are you again?
No, I'm younger than Megan.
Whoa.
We got a lot of grannies in terms of college soccer years, but you guys are so wise. Like honestly, some of these things you're saying, I'm like, I wish I had that perspective and like that introspection when I was your age. And I think you do an amazing job of articulating these things so that people who are listening can learn from you. Jill, you look like you have something to say.
I do. I just have a question because I think a lot of people will say, like, this all sounds great and this is amazing, but what do you do when there's heavy competition and your people that are in your circle, and you don't have to obviously throw anyone under the bus now, but I'm sure in your past you've dealt with this, right? Is how do you deal with someone who you're splitting time with, who wants your job, who's super competitive, who shows up to training every day and is a bugaboo because they're not playing, and the coach said to them, hey, you're going to play, you just got to wait your time until so-and-so makes more mistakes and then we're going to put you in, or you're our future, but then like they're just, their expectation and the reality don't match and they're grumpy. So how do you deal with that? Whoever has the most experience, you go first.
I can speak on this a little bit. I can give kind of 2 different perspectives. My freshman year, I was in a goalkeeping environment that maybe wasn't like the most intentional or the healthiest, and it was very much so surrounded by competition, and it's you versus me. It's next man up. Who's going to get the spot? Who's going to make the mistake first? And I remember how easy it was to fall into that trap when the people around me they were okay with that environment. And it was really easy for me to fall into that, oh, okay, I'm going to shoot the ball really hard on you, even though this is a warm up. Like, I want to make it be as hard as you can, like it can be on you, so that when I get in, my reps can be good. And like, am I proud of that? No. But it just shows how easy, like Jill just said, it is to fall into that trap when that expectation isn't being set by the goalkeepers around you or the coaches around you. But also on the flip side, this year, I'm in a position I've never been in before where I'm splitting time with a freshman. I'm 23 and she's 17. Like, we couldn't be further apart on the spectrum. But I think something that has made this experience a lot better for both of us is that we communicate with each other as teammates and then as people who are competing for playing time. I think that we have the utmost respect for each other because we have conversations of neither of us are being punished by not playing. This is simply a decision that was made by someone other than us. And we can make the decision to turn against each other and make this a toxic environment and make it an environment where we're not going to enjoy our season, or we can encourage each other, have each other's back, learn from each other, and make this a really, really enjoyable training experience. And so I think I was really, really intentional coming into this season to ensure that no matter what the outcome was, it was going to be a successful training environment. And that came from swallowing my pride. And on days where I know I'm not going to play the next game, I am my goalkeeping partner's biggest fan. I want her to be the best goalkeeper she is in training. I want to give her the best service I can. When she makes big saves the day before a game, I'm going to be the first one cheering for her. And I really think with her being a freshman and her being in the college environment for the first time, I'm really hoping that bleeds into her. So whenever she's in the position that I'm in, she can understand that that is invaluable to the freshman or the player that's not playing. And so I really think that the way that I look at it is I get to impact my team every other game on the field. So how during those days in between my games can I still impact my team? Because I can't just disappear. That's not fair to my teammates. And it's not fair to sulk. And it's not fair to wish I was doing this or wish I was doing that. Like, I still have a presence and an impact on this team. And that might mean that I'm cheering the loudest as I can on the bench. And when my teammates are being successful, I get to celebrate them. And that's a position that I'm honored to be able to have. And so I think it's really understanding that you can accept the situation that you're in and celebrate the games that you get to play, while also competing to try and get those games that you're not playing in without tearing the person next to you down. I think that's the balance of, like, you gain nothing from tearing the person next to you down. And it doesn't help you, it doesn't help them, it doesn't help the environment. So it's kind of long-winded, but that's my answer.
It's good, though. I think that that's something that not a lot of people would be able to, like, have those words on.
Yeah, I think that's so hard. And ultimately, it brings us back to our identity and why we play this sport, like who we are and what do we want from this. And I spoke a lot yesterday with Alice about this because she was saying, like, high school soccer is so fun, or her dad was, and saying it's just so fun because there's, like, not that much pressure and everyone's so kind to each other. And I'm like, but why can't club soccer be like that? Why can't, like, when you're growing up and you're actually on a high level team, why also can't that be as enjoyable as something that doesn't really have that much consequence? And I really just sat with me tonight. I don't know the answer. And, like, maybe we're different here, right? Because, like, we try to enjoy the process and the development, but why can't it be like that majority of the time? Why does it feel like, oh, I'm so excited to go to, like, extracurricular basketball because that's so much fun. But then isn't soccer supposed to be fun? Like, isn't goalkeeping supposed to be fun? I know there's a different element of pressure attached to it, but still, it should be enjoyable.
Yeah.
That's not a question, just a statement.
I feel like, can I say something off of it?
No, please, go ahead.
Well, it just, like, how you brought up identity and, like, Plaschko was talking about the competition side. I feel like my younger self was the person that was, my identity was wrapped inside of soccer. So the competition, it was like I couldn't, like, escape it. And it was like, it was always me versus you because it was essentially my pride and identity on the line. And versus, like, through a lot of therapy, shout out therapy, like being able to, like, realize that you aren't your sport, and that like soccer is like what you do but not who you are, and goalkeeping is also what you do and not who you are, it allows you to kind of like take that step back and be like, okay, like this is an environment that I can be like who I am, and it's not like I don't have to be a me versus you, because at the end of the day, like it's just a sport and it's just a game, and my why isn't to win, and it's not to like get all of these stats and save all these goals, but my why is so that like I can make friends and I can like have an impact on someone else that is struggling to realize that they are more than their sport, and that they are worth so much more than however many minutes they play. And I feel like that's like a lot of what happens when you're younger, is you get not like this pressure that you are your sport, and so then now your identity is kind of all entangled, so your confidence is wrapped in how good you perform, and so now your competition is like all you have. Like I have to be better than the girl to my right or left, because now I don't know what I'll be if I'm not. And so that you saying that kind of just made me think about like the younger self of me really was like, if I had someone like Plaschko that really pushed me to understand that, like appreciating what I have, but also encouraging, I would have gone so much like further in the way I treated myself also.
I'm taking notes. You guys are crushing.
I feel like because we're all so senior in our environment, we're taking on a role that's a lot bigger than just being a goalkeeper who stops shots. And I think we are all like taking in that role of like mentoring the people under us and leaving a legacy for the girls under us, because we care about our teammates. And I really do think that that's something that's like special about like the environment at TKI, is I think I learned how to do this because of my summer surrounded by you guys and surrounded by an environment that was so positive. Like, I don't know if I could like, I wish I could say that I could have stepped in this year and been able to see my identity outside of like the fact that I'm not playing in every single game like I maybe hoped for. But I don't know. I think it's just like so fun to see you guys be able to have this conversation of like having an identity outside of soccer and having the perspective that we all have of being able to like want to leave something better than what we entered into as freshmen. So kudos to both of you, because I think that's great.
I think my insight on this is I've kind of like, how do I want to word this? I had like a switch in mindset about 2-3 years ago where I was always trying to prove something. Like I was fortunate enough to be like playing at Wake Forest and like getting minutes and working to like make a name for myself, but I had this like switch of mindset where it was, I heard this quote where it was like, you don't have to like scream your name for people to hear you. You can kind of just let time do that. Like just like putting your head down and like working in the moment to be your best self. In hand, it also like pushes everyone else around you, but it also like kind of like has this like ease in your mind to where like you don't have to like constantly scream to saying like I'm this, I'm good enough, I'm this, like I'm better than this person, all of this. Like time will show that. You just have to like stay in the moment, like stay present and constant in like what you what you currently have and everything you've grown to get there. But just know that like you're just constantly like trying to like scream and say your name, saying like I deserve this, I want to be here. One, it's kind of unproductive, but two, it's also counterintuitive in the sense where it's just taking energy away from what could be put into you, like working hard in this moment. And like, yes, sometimes it's unfair and it sucks and it's hard to like see other people maybe like living your dream or doing what you want to be doing. But like just by staying present in the moment, being grateful and not complacent, but being grateful for like how you've gotten to where you are in hand, like it's gonna eventually either get to the point where you want to be, or you find a path that can maybe encourage other people to bring you there also. So I think that's my take on that. But
yeah, that's huge. You guys valuable, and I think that's a great question, Jill, because that is something that we do unfortunately see a lot of too, like people not knowing how to handle that competition, or maybe like someone wants to be this positive force, but then it's like really hard to control that when someone else isn't really viewing the environment that way. For the sake of time, we're gonna do this last one. You have 30 seconds or less to answer, okay? And we're gonna go Megan, Maddie, KP. Got it? And the last tip we have of like setting the tone in a really good training environment is great service. We always say at TKI, the best way to make a fast friend is great service. So talk to us about what that looks like in 30 seconds or less, Megan.
I just think that you want to give your training partner the service that you would want to get when you're in nets. So if you're trying to hit hands, hit their hands. If you're trying to work on diving to one side, give them a service that's going to allow them to do so. And I also think it's important to tailor. If they're really struggling with something, build up in the service and like gauge your service and the difficulty of your service to their success in the training so that they can still gain confidence even if it's maybe not like the full extension dive or the full spread save. Really being intentional about how can I help them gain confidence throughout this session to get to the end result.
Good.
I think sometimes when you're the server, you're like, why am I not in the goal? I want the reps, I want to work. But I feel like, especially in today's game, the ability to play with your feet and in possession is extremely important. And I think if you have the mindset that serving is just an opportunity to work on your in possession, you have the opportunity to be more intentional with your services. And if they're not where you want to be, I feel like honing in on your own development and going out on your own and working on your in possession will then tailor and help your teammates and yourself and your serves, which is extremely important for an environment.
Word.
I think Maddie stole my answer, but yeah, like that's my mindset. Like when I'm serving, I think I take like a lot of pride in my ability to distribute the ball and like just gearing my mindset from not that I'm not in net, but that I'm just working on a different skill set that's super important to goalkeeping.
Yeah, I love that, you guys. Jill, do you have any closing thoughts or anything you want to wrap up with for us?
Be what you want to see. That is my biggest takeaway from this, is if I want my environment to be more positive, more supportive, then I have to be that first, even on the hard days when I don't feel like it, even on the days where I get news that I don't want to get, even on the days where I get benched or I make a mistake or I'm tired or whatever. And unwavering being what I want to ultimately see as often as possible, because we're human, but be really intentional about that.
Brilliant. Thank you guys so much, and good luck with the rest of your season. You guys are not only incredible goalkeepers, but incredible people, and we're just so lucky and blessed that we got to hear some perspective from you today.
Thank you.
You guys are amazing.
Snaps. You guys, if you want to watch these guys, they're all playing in different conferences, or no? Yeah. Big 10, Big 12, SEC. Watch them on ESPN Plus. Watch them on ESPNU, SEC Network, all the things. But make sure you check in to watch them play. There's a big game coming up next Sunday, which I will be calling. It's Maddie's game against Tennessee, so I'm pumped for that. But you guys watch them play. Take notes on the in possession. Take notes on the shot prevention, because they are very elite at that. That's all I got to say. We'll catch you later.
Catch you later.